Hello and welcome to lesson 39 for junior English. Today is a bit busy. We are going to have our last reading of the informational texts going into essay number 3. We're going to look at the rubric for essay number 3 and how it is a little bit different from essay 1 and 2. We're going to talk about how you can get extra credit by reading the things they carried and doing some ACT prep with that text. And that is the class. We will have next Friday off on the 12th. And this Friday, the 5th, will be an asynchronous day. So if you are watching this because you're in a blue class on Friday the 5th, thank you very much. I will also be running my classes live as normal because I have already gotten both vaccinations. So I will be in class on Friday, even though your other blue classes will probably not. Here we go. Our upcoming assignments in green are progress assignments. In red are mastery assignments. The only mastery assignment right now is the 15K extra credit booster that you could have done, and you can still do. I'm going to keep that opportunity ongoing. For progress, the first Zimbardo reading is due at the end of the day on the 5th, on Friday. Your SACS reading that we did at the beginning of this week will be due on Tuesday next week, and the Kudo reading that we'll be doing today is going to be due next Friday on the 12th. Even though we don't have class on the 12th, the Kudo reading will be due on the 12th. Your outline for essay number 3 will be due on the 19th. We'll be assigning that on Monday next week on the 8th, so keep your eyes peeled for that in Google Classroom. All right. If you'd like to grab the recordings, assignments, and lessons from the Living Syllabus, that link will take you there as well. Here's our learning targets for today, and note that there is a chat check in the top right-hand corner. That will be during the live class at the end of the slides that have the chat check on them. We'll pause for a second and check in chat that to see if anyone has a G, a Q, or an A. They'll just type G's for go on, Q's if they have a question, and A if they need to hear something again, and they'll just tell me what they need to hear again or to hear explained in more depth. So we'll do quick GQA checks as we go through these in class to kind of get more activity in the chat and to get a little bit more engagement in the class. So for writing, we're going to be exploring the rubric for essay number 3 to prepare for our work. It means we can recognize the skills and expectations to get 4s on each rubric item. For literature, we're going to explore the primary text, the thing they carried as an extra credit assignment. It means you can prep for the ACT while reading a really good literature text. And then for our informational lesson, we're going to read and annotate our third and final article, For Many Returning Vets, Moral Injury is Just as Difficult, to prepare for essay number 3. So this is the last article we're going to read together in class. There are many more in the assignment collection in Google Classroom. I'll direct you towards that also today during the lesson. Our week structure, real quick. Mondays, Tuesdays, recorded lessons and live in-class lessons. Make sure that you're completing the check-in link, even if you're not coming to the live class. Make sure that you're completing the Google sign-in link that I post in the stream so that you're getting credit for your attendance. My office hours run from 12 to 2 p.m. on Wednesdays. That link's also in the Google Classroom. And then we'll have a lesson at the end of the week that I will record on Wednesdays, post Wednesdays, and have ready for you before the beginning of the class on Thursdays. Let's look at our voice and choice for this week. I've been really digging getting all these in. A lot of people have been doing them and doing them to fidelity, so I'm really digging them. I'm going to be responding to your first voice and choice and your second voice and choice this weekend. So if you haven't heard back from me yet, don't worry. I'm listening, and I'll be responding to you with my voice this weekend. All right, so for voice, your prompt for the voice part of this assignment was, how should people be held responsible for their actions? And again, you can talk for as long and as short as you like on that topic, but how should people be held responsible for their actions? All right, for choice, there are the 10 paths, and you'll be choosing one path to respond to. So respond to the prompt that matches your interests and matches your career path. We'll do a chat check on this in class to make sure that everyone understands how to do this, where to go, and how to complete this assignment. All right, so for our writing lesson today, we're going to talk about the rubric for essay number 3. So let's go ahead and do a rubric walk. The green are um, aspects of this part of the rubric that you should kind of aim yourself at if you're trying to get a 3 and a 4. The yellow are things that you would want to avoid if you want to get a 3 or a 4 on your rubric. So for purpose and focus, the first part of our 4-part rubric, you're going to want to be sticking to a clear topic. To get full credit, you're going to want to maintain focus on your audience and purpose throughout the essay. This is an argumentative essay, so you're going to be maintaining focus on your audience as a group that you want to convince of your correctness. You're also going to effectively engage the audience by providing relevant background information necessary to anticipate its needs. So you're going to want to give the audience enough information to agree with you that you are correct. The difference between a 4 and a 3 is that you may not consistently maintain this focus, and you may only generally anticipate audience needs. You're only really going to drop down into a 2 if you're not providing consistent background information or you are demonstrating a lack of awareness of the audience. If you do the outline and if you do a rough draft and get feedback, you should be in a 3 or a 4 for purpose and focus. All right, idea and development. I recognize that there's a lot of text on this slide, so we're going to live here for just a minute. Idea development is different for this essay than it has been before. You must include an opposing viewpoint to your claim to get higher than a 2 on idea development for this essay. And one more time, you have to include an opposing viewpoint to get higher than a 2 on this essay. So whatever your argument is for how people determine morality, good and evil, right and wrong, you have to include an opposing viewpoint in there somewhere. The easiest way to do that, in my mind, is to argue against one of the texts we have in our text sets. So if you can argue against these statements in one of our texts, you're going to have an easier time getting a 3 or a 4. We're going to go through that in more detail on the guided outline assignment next week, how to argue against a text. We're going to use an example, specifically the Zimbardo example for that. If you want to kind of work through that, work along with me in that, I think you'll have an easier time if you're kind of confused or uncertain about this. Also, you need to use the SEPI format for incorporating your quotes. What is that? Basically, you're introducing quotes using a introduction word like says, states, argues, one of those terms. Basically, the 5-part quote system that we worked on in the second essay was the SEPI format. So you're going to need to introduce a quote, have the quote, and then talk about the quote. And if you can do that correctly, you'll be in that 3 to 4 range also. Idea development is easily the hardest part to get 3 or 4 for this essay. So we're going to spend a lot of time talking about how to make sure that you're getting a 3 or a 4. The biggest difference between a 3 and a 2 is that you are not directly talking about opposing viewpoints, or you don't have opposing viewpoints. And that's kind of the land of 2s and 1s if you don't talk about the views that disagree with you. That's a big part of succeeding in this essay, because you're making an argument, and the strongest arguments incorporate some acknowledgement of counter-arguments. All right, so for structure, we're sticking with the 5-paragraph format. They say 2 pages. You could easily get to 2 pages if you're using a good, juicy quote from one of the 3 texts that we are reading in class together and making comments on in class together as a group. We are doing that during class time and doing that during these reading during these online recorded versions. To get a 3 or a 4, you want to have an introduction, you want to have support paragraphs, you want to have a conclusion. You also want to have transition words that guide the reader. You want to have variety in sentence lengths and structures, not all just the same short, choppy sentences. You want to have some variety, some commas in there, switch things up a little bit if you can. And the best way to make sure that you're getting full credit on this is to turn in a rough draft when we have rough drafts due. And that'll be due sometime, I believe, at the beginning of the month after February. And again, the quick way to fall down into the 2 range is having just simple sentences, or not having a clear order to your ideas, or not having that structure of introduction, support, and then conclusion paragraphs. The last one is language and conventions, and this one is probably the easiest one to score a 3 or 4 on if you do a rough draft and get feedback on, because I will give you as much feedback as I can for your rough draft. Now that doesn't mean if you turn in a rough draft the day the final draft is due, I'll be able to give you feedback. If you turn in a rough draft on time, I'll give you really good feedback that will help you get to a 3 or a 4. If you turn in a rough draft 1 or 2 days before the final draft, I may not have time to get to it and grade it and give you really strong feedback before the final draft is due, simply because my life might get in the way of me being able to hustle to do that. So again, make sure that you're turning in your rough draft on time to get really good feedback on language and conventions so that you can make those changes before your final draft and get into that 3 and 4 point range. And you really only will be in the 2 and 1 if you struggle with language and conventions and you don't do a rough draft. So the rough draft will help you with this one. And if you do the outline correctly, if you do the outline and use it well, then you'll be solid probably in the other 3 parts of this essay, of this rubric as well. All right, just real quick reminder. So we're going to do all the required work together in class. Any extra credit work might require out of class work. The required work in the green above are the progress assignments. There's a progress extra credit in yellow. The extra credit, the things they carried reading, we're going to talk about that in just a second. The required red assignment, the outline, will be due on the 19th. And there is some mastery extra credit also in yellow. So the green and the red will be in the grade book on their due dates or shortly after their due dates. So keep an eye out for those green and red assignments. Those are the ones you want to be completing for this class to get a grade in this class. The yellow are going to improve your grade, potentially help you on the ACT, or the 15K extra credit booster could potentially be something you add to your work resume. All right, so we're going to moving on to our literature learning target. We're going to talk a little bit about how you can read the things they carried for extra credit and get extra credit on your progress grade while working towards the ACT reading test. Again, this literature unit is going to be about storytelling and language as a tool to quote unquote save our soul. So we're going to be reading The Things They Carried, which is a book aimed at the goal of saving the soul of Tim O'Brien. This is a 50-point extra credit assignment, so it is worth slightly more credit than any of the progress assignments we've had so far. That's to reflect the time investment it would take to complete if you listen through to the recording that I made. The recording I made is 50 minutes long. It is a long recording. It also has all of the answers embedded in it. Let me say that one more time. All of the answers to this assignment are embedded in that recording. I answer every question that you have in the recording, every question that's required on the assignment. So if you want an easy 50 points, or at least if you want a 50 points that only costs you time, this is a really good way to get 50 points that costs time. Now that said, it's a really good book. It's a really good reading. It's absolutely on grade level reading. It is right where you need to be at for difficulty in preparing for the ACT. The questions in there are ACT aligned questions and are formatted to sound similar to the questions on the ACT. So if you read along with me, you're going to be doing some good prep for the ACT. All right, this extra credit reading is one of 4. I'm going to be doing 4 of these because they do cost me a lot of time to put together too. You're going to answer the embedded ACT practice questions by adding comments, as well as there's 2 journal questions at the end. The questions are marked with the letter Q and a number. If you're listening to the video recording, pause the video whenever you hear me play my ukulele and answer the question before the answer is given for the best practice for the ACT. So if you really want to practice for the ACT, pause when you hear the ukulele, answer the question on your sheet, and then unpause to hear my answer. If you're just listening through for the answers, you don't need to pause. I will make a ukulele noise right before each of the answers on the video. It is 50 minutes long. It is not a required assessment. This is not a required assignment. This is extra credit. This is not in-class work. We are not going to spend 50 minutes in class doing this because we really need to stay laser focused on preparing for essay number 3, and I don't want to give you more assignments and more reading on top of that. That said, I really, really want to help you prep for the ACT, and I know this is a good way to do it. How are you going to be adding comments and completing this assignment? I'm going to walk you through that real quick. What you'll do is you'll highlight the bold words next to the question boxes. There are question boxes in each of your assignments. You're going to highlight the bold words right next to the question box, and you're going to comment on those bold words to add your answer. So for this question, how is this passage an example of parallel structure? You'll highlight those words on the left that are bold, and then you'll answer because the verbs are repeating, and I can see the repeating verbs wash, unwrap, hold, and spend. And that's the actual answer to question 1, and that's the answer the same way I give it in the recorded version. And here's another answer to question 2. The answer to question 2 is D. All you need to do is highlight the bold and then make a comment to answer those questions. I don't feel too bad giving you the answers to the first 2 questions here because there are about 20 questions. Like I said, it's not a short reading, it's a 50-minute reading. It is a really good book if you're interested at all in Vietnam, if you're interested in the military, if you're interested in military experience, especially in foreign war. Tim O'Brien is absolutely one of the best writers on the topic. He pulls no punches. There is both action and loss and combat and conflict and just really good writing. So I highly recommend it. And if you're logged into the live class, we are going to hit a GQA question here too. All right, that is the end of the lesson for me. To complete the assignment, you can also just complete it on your own. We're going to do all the required work together in class. Everything in green and red we're going to do together in class, and we'll have time in class to do. Everything in yellow we are not going to do in class. I will give you directions, but we're not going to have enough time in class to do those things. They will help you in the grade book if you want to do them, but if you don't, they will not hurt you. All right, let's look at our informational learning target for today. We're going to read and annotate an article on morality, and that's going to talk to us a little bit more. It's our last opportunity to talk about morality using these articles before we start working on the outline. If you have been commenting and working through these, you have a collection of 9 comments on hopefully 9 interesting quotes to you from 3 different articles. And you're going to be using at least one of those articles in the essay that you're going to be writing about morality starting next week. We're going to begin work on that outline next week. The essay topic, again, is how do we evaluate what's right or wrong? You're going to be making an argument about how people decide what's right or wrong, and you're going to use text to support your argument. Or you're going to argue against those texts. So you don't just need to use those texts to support your claim. You can make a claim about the way that people decide right or wrong, and then argue against those texts too. So, and that will make it actually easier to get the full credit for idea development on the rubric. So we're going to work on that specifically next week. Those articles are under Mastery Assignments in Google Classroom, under Essay 3 Materials and Texts. We have read three of those together after this lesson. There are, I think, 12 articles total, so there's still 9 other articles that you could look at. I picked the 3 that I think are the quickest and most easy to incorporate into essays to read together as a class. The rest of them are interesting, certainly. Some of them are very dense. Some of them are also quick, but I just didn't want to do more than 3. So you can look around in there, and if you don't like any of the 3 articles that we did together in class, you can use one of those articles instead. All right, so if you're an online student, I'm not actually going to read aloud this one because this is an interview, and you can still get a link to the interview that they did on NPR. There are 3 different ways, if you're watching this recording, to get to that audio. You can take a picture of the QR code on the right side of the screen to go there on your phone and listen on your phone. You can type in the URL code if you are a glutton for punishment or you just love typing, or you can Google Timothy Kudo interview NPR, and it should be one of the first links. Like I said, I'm not going to read through this live in the recording. I'm going to click through to the end, but I am going to click through as I listen to it. So if you're listening to it on your phone, you can continue to watch this, and it should keep up with the audio. So I'm going to start the audio for myself, and I'm going to click through on the video. So if you're listening to the audio, I'll tell you when to start the audio, and you can continue reading along and looking at some images that I found to make the reading a little bit more interesting and the interview a little bit more interesting, with some pictures from Afghanistan and of Timothy Kudo and the interviewer. And I'll let you know in just a second that you should start the interview. This is not actually the beginning yet, but what this is just kind of the introduction. So in 2013, Timothy Kudo, a former Marine captain, wrote an opinion piece for the Washington Post about grappling with moral injury as a veteran who was killed during wartime. In this article, Kudo shares his experience with NPR's Weekend Edition Sunday host Rachel Martin. As you read, take notes on the ways Captain Timothy Kudo describes how he experienced war and its aftermath. And you can now start. All right. At that point, if you just listened along, I just listened too. If you just listened to that interview, we've just finished that reading for the class. That's our last third reading. You need to go and make comments on that reading in Google Classroom to get credit for it. And I have a few questions for you to take home, just like the other two. So again, that first question, when are we responsible for our actions, legally and morally? Does a person's perception of an event change the good or evil of their actions? When people do bad things by accident, is it as wrong as when they do them on purpose? Why is it different? How is it different? And does that difference matter to the people who are harmed? How did your own sense of good and evil develop? How do you know what's right? So we're going to be working formally on the outline starting next week. Thank you guys for listening very much. We're coming to the end of this lesson. So again, we're going to be working on all things in green and red together in class. None of that is out of class work. The only out of class work in this class will only ever be extra credit and not required. So we just did the Kudo reading. If you read along with that and made comments on the assignment, you're good. There's time at the end of this class as well. We're clocking in just under 30 minutes. That's where I like to have it. Gives us about 15-20 minutes at the end of class to discuss and work with anyone who has questions. We have hit our learning targets for today. Thank you very much for listening. Our upcoming assignments in green are progress assignments. In red are mastery assignments. The only mastery assignment right now is the 15K extra credit booster that you could have done, and you can still do. I'm going to keep that opportunity ongoing. For progress, the first Zimbardo reading is due at the end of the day on the 5th, on Friday. Your SACS reading that we did at the beginning of this week will be due on Tuesday next week, and the Kudo reading that we'll be doing today is going to be due next Friday on the 12th. Even though we don't have class on the 12th, the Kudo reading will be due on the 12th. Your outline for essay number 3 will be due on the 19th. We'll be assigning that on Monday next week on the 8th, so keep your eyes peeled for that in Google Classroom.